We'll make you feel kind. We're gonna have a good time. Let's get the meaning down. We're gonna spread being nice around. You just go right ahead, because it's here and it's now. Just move every bone to a cosmic powwow. Cosmic powwow. Cosmic powwow.
Hello, I'm Dr. Nancy Mroczek. What we'll be doing during the course of this series of televised interactions is trying to move forward on becoming actively aware of the quality of life we are living. We'll be working toward changing and improving that quality so that people can feel better. I am a behavior and neuropsychologist by training and experience, and I work with people on behavior management in their personal lives. Most of all, I am a lifelong philosopher in pursuit of examining and responding to the deep questions of life. Some of you may also know me as a singer and composer of songs in the Boston area. Today, we are going to address a most urgent matter. That is the many destructive and negative qualities of the way we are living as a people in a society together. Some of the negative conditions I am referring to are the escalating stress we feel, the violence of our lives and the consequences of that violence, the anger we feel toward others, our job, family, government, church, military, and so on, the speed and intensity of how we proceed from one situation to another, the fatigue, burnout, and cancers which afflict us, the undercurrent of depression and sense of foreboding and fear that is part of our daily regimen, the shortchanging that our young persons and our seniors experience in the quality of life they are subjected to by not being properly cared for, the precious time surrendered on dead, useless, and even frustrating episodes like staying on hold on the telephone or waiting in traffic. The exposure to contaminants, ingredients, and effects which are harmful and toxic to ourselves. The pain of animals being used for experimentation. And the cognizance that animal and plant species are dying. And worst of all, having to manage these situations as isolated individuals facing the disordered and conflicting and opposing cultural forces in our struggle to live. To make a change for better quality in the life we are living, we have to think, really think, hard. Think about ourselves and for ourselves, and at every aspect of our usual life space, to observe the qualities of our lives which are less than satisfactory and likely deteriorating. We must accept that our life does not have to be as it is, that it can be changed for the better, if and only if we will to apply mental effort to working on its quality. Now, with the purpose of discussing this matter, I should like to introduce our guests. First, we have Mr. Abdu Adem. Mr. Adem is a former mathematics teacher, still certified. He is trying to change careers and currently works as a customer representative in copying and printing. He is seeking employment in finance and financial services. Originally from Ethiopia, Mr. Adem has lived in the United States for 15 years. Next, we have Ms. Robin Towner. Ms. Towner is a special education teacher in the Boston Public Schools. She also acts in local theater productions, and she has a 10-year-old daughter. Before we start our discussion, I would like first to pose the following thoughts. In order to think and to work on improving our quality of life, we must discard programmed reactions we may have to marketed beliefs and commercialized experience. Such reactions often have little to do with the actual lives we live each day. In this respect, media messages and commercials interfere with thinking when, to a great extent, they condition our brain to portrayals and ideas of behavior that are not relevant directly to our own quality of life, or, for that matter, not real and even contradictory to anybody's life. Hence, to think about our own life for our own sake, we must separate ourselves from the great landscape of such commercialized notions of experience. It is a massive undertaking to bring about a society which can do much better. Let's restate the goal: quality of life. We assume we want to be peaceable together. We want to feel friendly. We want to feel that life has meaning and that life has worth. Right here and right now, on this earth, not when we die. This is our task, to reach a higher level of civility and humanity toward ourselves and toward each other. To have laughter, love, compassion, and most of all, respect for each other and for all of life. The hardest and most challenging goal of human future is to work on the sorry condition of our human circumstance by working on ourselves and on the way we live. We take on this momentous human goal by facing the way we live and by deciding to change. We need not be stupefied by how we come to be happy, content, or feel meaningful. We have years of human experience, years of science, years of suffering, years of literature, and vast scientific knowledge about why humans do what they do and how they are affected by the contingencies that surround their lives. Now, I'd like to say a few words about this very special technical term, contingencies. Contingencies are all around us. Our psychology is all around us, and every single thing that we do, say, think, or feel is interfaced with contingency. Contingency is the environment. Contingency can be the temperature of the room you're in right now. It can be the view of the television that is impinging on your brain right now. It can be the sense in your stomach of whether you're hungry or half full or completely full. It can be a background worry in your brain that you may have overeaten for dinner. and hence you don't live in a country where people have not had dinner. It could be the traffic noise outside. It could be the neon light above you. It could be the people in the room with you, or the fact that you might feel lonely because people are not in the room with you. Contingencies are all those features that you can really physically feel and touch and see and smell and taste. And by the way, smell is a very important contingency that we're not even aware of, that we are going around a lot using our sense of smell with our brain not even being consciously aware of it. And also things about your psychology that you cannot touch per se, but you certainly can feel them, and you often don't really realize that you're feeling them. Things about what people might have said to each other during the day, or people that you may like that you are near or you're not near, or worrying about getting a job, or thinking what color drapes you want to put in the living room, or making sure you pay your bills. All of these things may not be able to be literally seen like I see this chair that I'm sitting in, but they are contingencies that impinge on your life. And I'm trying to say that these contingencies affect the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you think, the way you feel. And you can arrange contingencies in your life so that your life has a better quality. You can arrange contingencies so that you and me and everybody else is not jam-packed into a small space, is not living under schedules that force us to rush and get tight muscles and feel very on edge all the time, is arranged so that we have time to spend with each other and talk to each other, is arranged so that we have enough space in our homes to feel relaxed and have something pretty to look at so that we can take a rest from our work existence, is arranged so that even our workplaces have a more human quality, and getting to and from them has a more human quality. We can change contingencies so that every aspect of our life that we can think of can bring out the best in people and just ignore what is not so good and what is happening to us the way it is right now. We should become very astute observers of every little nod and every wink and everything we see in each other and in ourselves, and everything we see in our environment, and the effects that it have on us, and think about how we could change the slightest, the smallest, the more big, and the biggest things to make big differences in having a very human, pleasant culture to live in. Now, let us hear from our guests on the personal perspective and experience of quality of life issues that are important to them. First, let us hear from Mr. Abdul Adem about some of the experiences in his life. Mr. Adem.
As she, I would like to explain the contingencies that she was talking about earlier, and some of the changes I've made within the last year regarding my work and my lifestyle and the environment that I live in. I recently just moved from Rhode Island. I've lived over there for about 15 years. Went to school over there, became a teacher. I thought for 5-6 years, but then life became a little bit routine for me, and I decided to move back to Boston and change profession, and I'm in the process of doing those things. So basically that's all I have to say.
Could you tell me what kind of contingencies were routine for you?
Especially the lack of community life, partly because I'm an immigrant and the area that I was living in was very short in terms of immigrant population, and also the commute that I used to do, and generally the nature of the work that I was doing, the lack of satisfaction, the pressure, lack of time to do anything else, all that prompted me to change course, basically.
Could I ask you what kind of pressure you had in doing your job?
Part of the problem was teaching profession that I personally experienced was that there was no immediate positive feedback of whether you were doing a real good job or not. You were just going through a bureaucracy, dealing with kids every day, and trying your best to teach, but at the same time there are all kind of different factors that are beyond your control that affect your work, and that kind of created a stressful situation for me.
Can you pinpoint a factor that was beyond your control that you felt helpless about, that was important to you?
One event that I specifically remember is the fact that there was one student about 15 years old who was my student, and we had some kind of violence problem in the school, like gangs and different groups threatening each other, and this kid was playing with shotgun and was his friend in the basement, and his friend basically shot him and he was killed, and that was one of the very stressful moments that I felt was out of control. There was nothing that I personally could do about it.
So you found basically that events happening in the school were so impersonal and so kind of foreign, if you will, and unfortunately violent,
Yeah.
where they shouldn't be violent, that you were in a kind of situation you might never have imagined that you would be in.
Yeah.
I see. And what kind of things are important to you to get satisfaction when you're on a job?
Well, basically, I know that jobs in general they're not by nature 100% satisfactory, but in most cases, I'm at this moment inclined to do a job where if I leave the job, it's off my back, and I don't have to think or take it home. And also where there is even a small time where you can make a phone call or things like that. When you're a teacher, in my experience, you rarely even have enough time to eat during the school hours. You are constantly on duty, constantly trying to cover for someone else, or do cafeteria duties, or counsel kids, or tutor kids after school, and all that kind of work.
You know, I think you'd probably hardly find a job today where you can't take a break, where you have to eat fast, where you may not eat at all. I know some situations that I've been in, people scheduled meetings during their eating times. There was never an eating time. It was eat, and this is very difficult for me because I like to digest my food properly, and I don't feel well if I'm, frankly, physiologically, it's not proper to be eating and thinking of things that are business. It's proper to be sitting down, being thankful you have the food perhaps, and then noticing the food, thinking about the food, taking it in slowly, and feeling how the food feels and tasting how the food tastes. So it's contradictory to health and welfare, and we certainly are a nation that says a lot about health and welfare. But we're doing a lot of things, I would have to say, that aren't for people's health and welfare, that might send us to the doctor, both psychiatric and general medicine, pretty fast. So, yes, and yes, so I see. Do you, on your current job, do you have more time to do?
Yeah, my current job, even though it doesn't fulfill some of the requirements I have, I can schedule time off. It's flexible, it's relaxed, there's some creative aspect to it, and the feedback, more or less, as a customer service representative, the feedback is immediate, and you know right there whether you're doing a good job or not. And basically, but the flexibility part of it I like very much. Then I have time to do whatever I want.
I think it is a marvelous thing if we would start working towards all of us having more flexible kinds of circumstances. So many of us feel we have a ball and chain when we think about it. It's to the point where we don't even want to think about it. We just get up and do it because we feel, what good would it be to think about it? But you managed to break your circumstance. How did you manage? Now, a lot of people wouldn't do that. You had what for now would have been a preferred profession, being a teacher to a customer representative. How did you manage to break that?
I just decided that it was time for me to change. I think even though I made a lot of sacrifices financially, I had to make a conscious decision to say I have to be in a situation where I'm less stressed and I have the time to sit back and relax, read a good book, or have the flexibility to do other things. So I made a lot of sacrifices indeed, but for me that was worth it, and that's the decision I made to break the cycle or the routine that I was in.
What's one main thing that you could describe that's better for you in this new lifestyle that you have?
Well, basically, I'm now in an atmosphere in a city where there is a lot more diversified population. I don't feel an outsider. I am also engaged in Ethiopian community events. I go out to concerts and all these things. I don't have to drive all the way to Boston or Cambridge to attend these events. So that's been one of the benefits, which is being part of a greater community that's like me and things
So you like
that.
to be around like-minded people. It is very soothing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's
like
very
when we find someone who agrees with us, it's so soothing. We really tend to like those people.
Yeah.
Yeah, we think highly of their intelligence when they agree with us. Yes. Well, we'll come back to some more of this. Maybe speaking about the materialism aspect later. We will return to a discussion, but right now I would like to hear from Ms. Towner what her take is on stresses of life or issues of life in the life we are living.
Well, specifically, I like to look at parenting. I'm a single parent and I'm a teacher, and that gives me a unique perspective on what it means to parent in the 90s. There are several things that our lifestyle really impacts on our parenting. And one is, right now there are millions of children being raised in poverty. And poverty level is, we're talking about, below $15,000 a year for a family of 2 or 3, where the basic needs of food and clothing and health care and shelter aren't being met. And when you have a circumstance where basic needs aren't being met for millions of children, those children are not going to grow up developmentally or cognitively healthy, which means they come to school at age 5 or 6 and they haven't had their basic emotional, physical needs met. And I believe that all parents want to do the best that they can for their children. I believe that all parents love their children. And I believe that many circumstances prevent parents from providing for their children. One of those circumstances are right now in our society, in order for a parent to provide the basic needs for children, that parent or a 2-parent family must work 2 jobs to provide basic needs, to provide the health care, the food, basic food, clothing that a child needs to be emotionally and physically healthy and to develop normally. And a parent must do that. They must work 2 jobs, or a 2-parent family must work 2 jobs, and a single-parent family must often work a second job or sacrifice even more time from the child, which impacts dramatically on the child's life. The third thing that really affects parenting is, because the parent has to work so hard to provide for the child, that child is away from the home at a much earlier age in childcare or in daycare, which in of itself isn't a bad thing, but the child, an infant child, needs to be resilient and flexible at a very young age because it suffers a loss from their basic parent at an extremely young age. The parent itself, the parent herself also suffers a loss from the child. That child needs to be able to bond and be flexible with another person, and the parent needs to be diligent in finding proper childcare and being diligent and make sure in maintaining the quality of that childcare. So these three factors in impacting parenting in our life lead to immense amounts of stress and anxiety. That stress and anxiety manifests itself in a couple of ways. One, parents worry constantly about the safety of their children, young children in their child care situations, older children in whether they're going to be their home life, whether they're going to be able to be at home or be in child care situations. An example of that is, I find from my experience that parents do not leave their older children, 11, 12, alone because of the safety concerns. They're concerned for that child's safety if they live in an urban environment, and they don't leave that child alone. So the child is lacking in some experiences towards independence. The child feels this anxiety and the stress. And because of the parents working, the amount of time that the child has with the parents is lost. So often the time that a child has with his parents is between the hours of 6 and 8:30, where an immense amount of things need to be done. The relationship between the child and the parent needs to be redeveloped. A meal needs to be provided. Homework needs to be provided. Hygiene needs to be provided, and some measure of emotional bonding needs to be provided. All of this within about a 3-hour scope that parents look at what their active parenting is, and weekends. So how does a family who is presented with trying to do the best for their children, and a child who genuinely and naturally wants to do the best for their parents and to be the best person they can develop, how does this family compensate for those things? Well, there's three things. One is awareness. I think a family, and the parents particularly, need to be aware of what the realities are of life in the 90s. The more you're aware of the choices that are made and the realities of rushing around in a limited amount of time, the more that family can make choices, make priorities. So the second thing a family needs to do to survive is to prioritize what's important to that family. Is a trip to the mall and a $60 pair of sneakers or a $100 pair of sneakers more important than doing a puzzle together as a family or working on a group project? The family needs to prioritize. The third thing the family needs to do to maintain itself and to stay intact and healthy is to communicate. Parents need to communicate with children about the realities of life and about the choices that they make at a young age, and include children in the decision-making process of that family. This I speak from as a professional in the education field and as a parent, as a single parent.
Well, I have a few things, many things to say to what you're saying. First, I would like to say that our whole thrust for having family values in the United States, which is the political fashion, is a literal impossibility, because you have to be together over many shared hours in a natural kind of living together way to have a family. You cannot have people coming together like billiard balls on the table and maintain
That's
a family.
That's a very good analogy.
And you can't come home at night and bond like glue. In other words, we've got 3 hours bond and do everything else. And furthermore, you're coming home at the time when you're exhausted, and like you say, everything else has to be done. So quality is out the window, even though I'm not an advocate of this idea of quality time. I think all time is time. There's no such thing as quality or unquality. And when you said that the children aren't resilient, or that they have to be resilient at an early age, children who are 1 and 2 and 3 years old are not resilient. They become resilient, but they haven't got what you call the cognitive, that is the mental. They are not thinkers yet. They seem very smart. Our new children are incredibly smart. They'll learn to read. They'll recite things that you can't believe. They're taller than usual. They seem to be big, but they are still not mentally reasoned. They are still at very immature levels, and they're forced to face these contingencies, unlike us, with the benefit of adult experience, in their own way, managing daycare, managing being pushed around, managing this great big world with no one to be by their side. So it's very serious for them indeed. And if very soon in life they reject authority, it's not a very surprising thing, because they do have to be their own authorities.
That would also lead to a profound emotional insecurity. To lose a base of security at such an early age leads to a profound insecurity that follows the child through adulthood and can lead to anxiety disorders and depressive disorders.
Well, and also you can beat them or join them. You can either fret and worry, or, as I see many new kids, they just cancel all affect altogether. Yeah. And you know, the world is their thing to take a tantrum on. The world is their thing to get by the most pragmatic way possible. You know, many children realize they're in the jaws of the shark, and they're learning how to handle it. But it doesn't make them these nice, peaceable, sweet things that pay attention to us when we say, "Oh, hello," very sweetly. They're not learned in empathy and cooperation and human affiliation.
Children are angry, and they often have the right to be angry because they perceive that they have been rejected and abandoned by their parents who are working so hard at a very early age, or by the parents who find that they can't provide for these children because of their own pressures in their life. And that follows the child through adolescence. My belief is that one of the reasons why we have such a high incidence of violence and drug abuse and early sexual activity and suicide of adolescents is because of this an adolescent looks at the adult world and says, forget it, I don't really want to be part of this. There's a hopelessness that has increased over the past few generations, and an adolescent wonders what their choices are, what is their place in the adult life that they see, and they choose some other directions.
And to our adults, we'd like to say, don't see the world as your adolescent sees it. Don't see the world as the child sees it. I believe in previous conversations with you, listen to what your children are saying. I see talk shows, people say, oh, just get a life. How can you condemn your parent or whatever? These are real feelings. There's real hurt, there's real anger, there's real pain. You cannot just get rid of real emotions, otherwise you're a liar. When you really have an emotion and it consumes you, there's no way you can walk out of your skin and leave the emotion behind. It's for real. And when adolescents commit suicide, it's very for real. By the time you don't care to live another minute, it's very for real. It's not a joke. We're going to carry on here further, but I wanted to bring up one more point, which is we should ask ourselves, do we parent to begin with? If we don't have these contingencies straight, and if the contingencies are bearing down, producing increasingly negative and sorry and depressed effects and hassled effects, should we not question when, if, how, why do we even bring a child into the world? Is parenting something we want to automatically do? To those of you out there, who might be considering it or maybe not even thinking about it at all, it's a very serious thing. There's very much more to say on this, but I remember you telling me, and I'll say it again, listen to your children. That doesn't mean they boss you around, and don't try to be nice to them when they're being outrageous to placate them. But hear, let them say what they want to say, no matter how strange and uncomfortable it sounds to you. It's for real. And not only are our children angry, we are angry. It is the decade of the 90s. The world is angry. This concludes the first segment on the meaning of toward a quality of life. Please tune in again for more. Thank you.
It's fun and it's one. It's us cosmic powwow. Cosmic powwow. Cosmic powwow. Cosmic powwow.